My name is Richard Neff, and I am a pastor, more accurately, a retired pastor. Through the years, as I have read the Bible stories, I have been fascinated by the minor characters who have appeared briefly in a Bible story and then have faded into anonymity. People like blind Bartimaeus and Zacchaeus and Simon of Cyrene. What were their lives like before they appeared in this Bible story? And what effect did the Bible story and their appearance there have upon their lives in the future? It was questions like these that prompted me to write this book, Simon of Cyrene, The Cross-Bearer's Legacy. Simon of Cyrene was a man who was pulled from the crowd in order to carry the cross that Jesus was bearing to the place of crucifixion when he no longer could carry that heavy burden. Simon had come to Jerusalem to celebrate Passover with a group of men from Cyrene, that village in North Africa. They had celebrated Passover on Thursday evening, and then on Friday morning, Simon and his brother-in-law, Lucius, took a walk out of the city. As they turned to come back into the city, as they were approaching the city wall, they saw before them a Roman centurion on his horse. As they got closer, they noticed a group of soldiers around the centurion, and in the midst of those soldiers, there were 3 men carrying their crosses to the place of execution. Simon picks up the story and says what has happened at that point. The prisoner rises under the cruel weight of the crossbar, takes a few more steps, and then stumbles and falls again, this time on both hands and knees. The heavy crossbar falls from his shoulder, and with a thud it hits the ground. After a few more blows with his whip, the soldier finally realizes this prisoner can no longer carry his burden. The soldier scans the crowd. He fixes his gaze on me. "You there, carry this man's cross up the road to the place where we will crucify these criminals." I look around, hoping the soldier is pointing to a person beside or behind me. "No, you," he commands. "You look like you're strong enough." Who, me?" I stammer, hoping I can escape this onerous task. "Yes, you," orders the soldier. "Get out here and pick up that cross." I step out and shoulder the man's burden. Despite his weakness and his pain, he looks at me with an expression of sincere kindness and gratitude. That kind gaze strikes deep in my heart. I cannot believe that any man suffering such intense pain would look at another with such love and gratitude. I fall in step with the soldiers as we walk to the place of crucifixion. Lucius follows us. When we come to the place where these 3 are to be crucified, I am relieved of my burden. The crosses are by the side of the road in full view of everyone, so all who pass may be reminded of what will happen to one who causes trouble. The soldiers hammer 6-inch long nails into the condemned men's wrists, pinning them to the crossbar. Then they lift the crossbars onto the vertical beam already in place. The remaining nails they drive through the prisoner's feet into the vertical pole in which the crossbars are attached. Blood begins to ooze off the men whose cross I carried. I cannot take my eyes from that man. He obviously is suffering great pain, but there is something compelling about him that grips my attention. His face, his eyes, his whole being belies the suffering he obviously is experiencing. He seems resigned to his fate, but still appears to be confident, trusting in God. I join Lucius on the other side of the road. He is standing with some people who are weeping and lamenting the terrible fate of their friend. The women stand by the side of the road crying and hugging to console each other. I have never seen anyone being crucified before. It's a terrible sight. Lucius whispers to me, "They say his name is Jesus." The Sanhedrin convicted him of blasphemy early this morning. Simon and Lucius continue their way into the city, and that evening Simon retires very early, but he cannot get to sleep. He lies tossing and turning all through the night until finally he picks up the story again. In the middle of the night, I can lie there no longer. Quietly, I arise, put on my robe and sandals, and leave the house. I walk down the street and through the gate to the city wall to hurry to the site of the crucifixion. As I approach, I can see in the darkness that the cross on which Jesus hung is empty. The centurion sees me approaching and advances toward me from the cluster of soldiers gathered around a small fire behind the crosses. The other two men are still hanging there. They will soon die. The centurion challenges me. "What are you doing here at this time of night?" I came to see what happened to Jesus. I was the one who carried the cross, you remember," I stammered. "I don't remember, but he died before sundown. Some of his friends lowered his body from the cross and took it to a tomb that some wealthy man offered to them." "He did not deserve to die," I volunteered. "You're right. He was an innocent man," says the centurion. "Then why did you crucify him?" I ask. "We are under orders. We do what we are told to do." With a wave of his hand, he dismisses me. I turn slowly to replace my steps into the city. With head bowed and filled with deep sorrow, I trudge back to the city and to Levi and Anna's home. The joy of Passover, the celebration of freedom for our people, is completely ruined for me by the horrible memory of this crucifixion. I am ready to leave Jerusalem to return to Cyrene and the familiar surroundings of home, but I will never be able to erase from my memory the terrible scenes I have witnessed today. Simon did return with most of the men to the town of Cyrene. 3 of the men stayed behind to celebrate Pentecost. When those 3 men returned to Cyrene, they told Simon that the man whose cross he carried had appeared to his followers after his death. And then they recounted to him that marvelous miracle of Pentecost and how they were converted to become believers of this man Jesus. Simon had trouble accepting their story, but finally he and his family were convinced as well, and they, along with a number of people in the town of Cyrene, became believers. They were baptized, and the church in Cyrene was formed. Simon suffered a tragic accident and died as a result of that. But his legacy was carried on by his sons Alexander and Rufus, and by the other people in the town of Cyrene. Rufus married, and he and his wife had 2 daughters, and they moved to Rome, to the capital of the empire, and lived there and participated in the life of the church in Rome. Rufus died a martyr's death in Rome, but a son was born to him and his wife, and that son would carry the legacy of the cross-bearer into the next generation. But that's a story for another book. This book, Simon of Cyrene, is really a novel. I look upon it as an historic novel because I have tried to remain very true to the stories in the Bible and to the history of the Roman Empire in those days. So I hope that as you read it, you will find it to be a story of faith and hope, of tragedy and triumph. And my very best wishes to you as you pick up this book and read the story of Simon of Cyrene